Good morning, everyone. Happy Thursday, and welcome to this month's Azure Infrastructure Community Call. Just to do a quick sound check, just to make sure everything's under control and working properly. Please type in the chat window what you had for breakfast this morning. And as those answers come in, it looks like we're doing just fine on the audio end, which is always good to hear, except for that someone hasn't had breakfast yet, so I apologize for you. But other than that, it looks like we're good to go. So just going through a quick few logistical pieces before I hand it over to Karl, just so you all know that this call is being recorded, so if for any reason you would not like to be part of a recording, please drop off now, and we'll have all of the slides and recordings presented later. And then after Karl's over and we end the stream, we do have a few little kind of take care questions after the fact. If you don't mind sticking around for that, they'll just automatically pop up in your chat window. But other than that, if you guys have any questions throughout this this community call, just type them in the chat window, and I'll either bring them up to Karl or I'll answer those as well. And same if you guys have any audio issues throughout the call, just let me know and I'll help you guys take care of that. But without further ado, Karl, I'll hand it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, sir. And boy, I have a kindred spirit out there somewhere in the community who hasn't had breakfast yet. I'm with you. I feel for you. It's been one of those mornings, but it's all good. I'll make up for it at lunchtime, I guess. So welcome everybody. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. For those who have attended the last couple of calls, I think you know me and my role here. Member of our global black belt team, I have been focused over the last 2 years on OMS and on Azure storage. And today we're going to talk about building a business around Azure Site Recovery, one of the components of the OMS suite that just so happens to consume Azure storage on the back end. So big coincidence there. And I've got a lot to share with you, a lot of really good information. I think we're going to dive into a demo as well of some of the new functionality of Site Recovery. But really, this is something near and dear to my heart. I was a business continuity director during my time as a customer, member of the storage team from an architecture perspective. So this was a really important part of what I did. I have personal experience with what we're going to talk about here, and helped a number of our service provider and solution integrator partners last year do exactly what we're going to talk about today. Building a business around disaster recovery. So, any customer that you talk to who is new to this concept, the concept of being able to quickly recover their business in an alternate location, may have some misperceptions around why they need to do so. And really, when we look at disasters and the concept of disaster recovery, we often think of those big geographic level events, right? Regional level events. In my home state of Florida, we're always worried about hurricanes. So we think about the natural disaster aspect of things. But when you look at this chart from Forrester, there are many, many other causes of significant downtime in application and data center environments. So, really, when you have that conversation and a customer is struggling to justify why do I need disaster recovery, this is a great place to start. That there are many, many things, many reasons that can cause significant downtime and can seriously impact their business. And then what does that impact look like? Well, in the world that we live in, really every business is 24/7 by 365. And there is a cost associated with being down. There's a cost that's intangible that has to do with that company's reputation. Can I trust them? There is lost revenue from transactions that can't be processed. There is, really a customer loss. If I'm in the right or depending on how you look at it, the wrong business where customers depend on my services, and if they're inaccessible, they have to go somewhere else, I'm going to lose customers. And that has a serious long-term impact. I felt that in one of my first IT jobs. I worked for a commodities trading advisory company. We had a serious outage, and we lost half of our customer base and went out of business shortly afterwards. So depending on the business, there's very little tolerance for downtime and outages. A good disaster recovery plan, a fast recovery, is really, really critical. And oftentimes, customers think of this in terms of something that's needed for only their most mission-critical applications, but with the new affordable options for disaster recovery, like disaster recovery as a service in Azure, I can afford to protect environments I couldn't afford to protect in the past. And one of those is my development and test environments. In one of my prior lives, my prior roles, we had an outage in our SAN infrastructure that served our development environment. For 2 days, we had 1,500 developers who couldn't work, who couldn't access the code they were checking in and checking out, and couldn't access the development environments that they needed to make sure that they were progressing with their code and their fixes. That was significant cost, having 1,500 developers who really couldn't work. So not only is it protecting those mission-critical environments, but it's protecting environments that have any cost impact associated with them, and now it's affordable with disaster recovery in the cloud. And then the final piece, and I think we've talked about this in the past, so I won't belabor it, but explaining the difference between disaster recovery and backup can really lead to business opportunities for you. Backup indicates restore, meaning it's going to take some time to recover that application and make it functional again. Disaster recovery is more akin to a warm standby environment that's an exact copy, an exact replica of production that's ready for me to bring online at the push of a button. Very, very important difference because of the time involved to recover with these two very different technologies. So we're going to talk today about site recovery. That's where we're going to spend the vast majority of our time together. And we think about site recovery as a data replication solution. So it is capable of replicating at a block level, meaning below the application level, below the operating system level, the file system level, changes that occur on a regular basis from one location to another. In our case, from that customer's production data center to Azure. We have a great solution that offers orchestration and enables recovery of multiple components of an application, so multiple servers that make up an end-to-end application in an orchestrated, coordinated fashion so that everything that needs to come up to make that application function properly can happen in an orderly fashion and can go back to a specific point in time, so there's no loss of continuity between the different layers of that application. Everything is kept in sync. So that's the primary way we think about site recovery. But site recovery also provides a great means to migrate virtual machines and migrate application workloads to Azure. And really the only difference between a migration and a replication, a disaster recovery use case, is a migration involves that move to Azure, that cutover to Azure once, with no intention to return back to the original production location. And what I'm going to show you during the demo today is how we've made this even easier with recent improvements in site recovery that have built in a migration workflow. So you can leverage this software, leverage this capability to migrate machines from on-premise environments, traditional data centers or hosted data centers, and also Amazon's EC2 environment. So moving machines from Amazon to Azure. And I touched on all of these points except for one, very rapid recovery through automation and orchestration, and that recovery can be based on multiple points in time. So I'm able to recover back to my most recent replicated data, my most recent point in time. If for some reason that is not a good point in time, somehow something bad happened and I have corruption that was present at that point in time. Maybe it's a virus, maybe it's accidental deletion, maybe it's malicious activity. What I can do is go back in time, rewind the clock to a prior point in time, going back 3 days, up to 3 days in the past, and bring that application online to a good point where it's immediately usable. So that's the one thing I didn't highlight there before, outside of the fact that I can test this functionality as many times as I want without disrupting production and without disrupting back-end replication, meaning I am not putting my disaster recovery capability at risk while I'm testing. And in the case of migration, we can integrate Azure Site Recovery with hybrid use benefit. So for your customers who are really excited about that capability, who would like to save up to 51% on their licensing costs for running Windows VMs in Azure, we now have made it capable to use their licenses through hybrid use benefit when these machines are migrated to Azure using Azure Site Recovery. And that is an active link there in the presentation that takes you to the blog entry describing how to do that, and a really exciting capability we added. So when it comes to building a business around site recovery, there are a lot of services opportunities. And in prior calls, I've walked you through this slide, so I'm not going to belabor it, other than disaster recovery requires a number of different infrastructure components to make sure that that customer has everything they need to be up and running and have the business functioning during that period where they're running in an alternate location, in this case being Azure. So I need to make sure that I have monitoring of that environment while it's running offsite in Azure. I need to make sure I have appropriate network connectivity between my corporate locations and Azure, and also the ability to direct my customers and my B2B partners through my public web presence. I have to make sure that they know to go to Azure, not to go to my primary production data center anymore. I have to have appropriately sized virtual machines that can run at the performance levels I need. The same with storage. I need high performance storage. I need lower performance, higher capacity storage. I need those options. I need file storage options as well. I also have to make sure that my client services are accessible from a directory services perspective, mobile device management. I have to make sure that all of that continues to function while I'm running somewhere else. And I need the automation in place to make this as easy as possible. So that ties into a number of different back-end Azure services and capabilities to provide this full-blown disaster recovery infrastructure. And each one of these leads to opportunities for you guys for services and for value add to your customers. And oh, by the way, while they're running in Azure, I can also add backup of those machines, so I'm not putting myself at risk with not having backups while I'm running somewhere else. And you can also add disaster recovery between Azure regions. So disaster recovery for their disaster recovery while they're running in the cloud. Oh, and maybe they rely on some Cisco, Palo Alto, Riverbed, F5 infrastructure that's going to require deployment from our marketplace. Yet another opportunity. So disaster recovery relies on a complete platform for that customer, a complete infrastructure platform. Azure provides that, and you all are the gateway. You all are the folks who can connect these things together for your customers. So here's a view of everything that I just highlighted there and the services opportunities. And is it something that you're going to be able to revisit with that customer and continue to provide services for? Or is it more of a one-time design, architecture, and implementation? And the great thing about site recovery is there are numerous, I mean, the vast majority of the services opportunities are recurring opportunities where you can visit them. You can act as a service provider on a frequent or quarterly or whatever you and that customer decide is best for them and best for their business. Boy, you get to go back. You get to continue to work with them on a disaster recovery as a service project. It's just really, really rich and robust with services opportunities. And it all starts with an upfront business impact analysis. So when I worked for a power company in the state of Florida, the largest power company in the state of Florida, and first got involved in disaster recovery for my business, I had to figure out what needed to be protected. And that required a business impact analysis. And in my case, I hired in an outside vendor. They came in, they worked with me. We did 2 weeks worth of interviews of stakeholders in the business. We decided what applications needed to be protected, what our recovery time objective was in order to make sure that we didn't suffer significant penalties from regulatory agencies, and also lost costs from not being able to do business, to provide power, to trade our fuel contracts. This was a really critical step in my disaster recovery project. And here's an upfront assessment opportunity for you. And I've embedded a sample business impact questionnaire. What do I need to go and talk to these business stakeholders about to figure out what needs to be protected, what my policies need to be? That business impact questionnaire came from searchdisasterrecovery.com, which is a great resource, along with drj.com, disasterrecoveryjournal.com, for vendor-neutral, industry-specific disaster recovery knowledge and expertise, and just starting points for conversations like this. So outside of what I highlighted on that last slide, here's yet another services opportunity, an assessment opportunity. A great place for you to be a trusted advisor to your customer. And if they're looking for some really sophisticated analysis of their applications and what connects to what and what relies on what, where are the dependencies, that's a great opportunity to talk about Application Dependency Monitor, a new component in the OMS suite. That's what it does. It maps connectivity between different layers in applications. So you know what ports need to be open in network security groups in Azure. So you know what servers need to be protected. You know what startup order they need to be booted in as part of a recovery plan in ASR. Application Dependency Monitor is just a great fit, a natural fit with a disaster recovery project. Just a great tool that we've made available. And if you haven't gotten a chance to see it yet, we did a great session at Ignite. So you can head to ignite.microsoft.com, look for Breakout 2095 that was delivered by my good friend Nick Burling. And it is an awesome, awesome rundown of everything that ADM can do. So I would highly encourage going out and taking a look at that session. It can be key to your disaster recovery business, and it can be key to your position as a trusted advisor with your customers. Okay, now there's more assessment opportunity. In order for a disaster recovery to cloud solution to be successful, in order for that customer to be happy with that solution, network connectivity is key, is the single most important part of the project. So network connectivity is determined by change rate, exactly how much data is net new or is modified in the environment that we need to protect. And I always laugh because most folks will talk about this conversation that you need to have with your customer in the sense of, well, you go in, you sit down, and you say, hey, Mr. Ms. Customer, what's your change rate? That's ridiculous. Nobody will ever know what their change rate is. They will have no clue. This is not something that is posted in a graph on on their dashboard in their NOC, in their operations center. This is not something that they're keeping an eye on. This is not something people know off the top of their heads, and they may have a difficult time figuring it out. So we need to provide tools to help them capture it, and I've highlighted a number of them here. Some of them better than others, some of them more sophisticated than others, some of them producing output that's easier to use than others. But the net result is, whatever tools they have available, you need to plug it into a back-end calculator, and I'm going to highlight that next. But the great news I have for you is help is on the way from our site recovery engineering team. They are very, very close to releasing a tool that runs with little intervention and little work required on the customer's part. It collects change rate data in a central location. It outputs that data in the form you see here in a spreadsheet, but it does more. I'm going to highlight that in a second. And it highlights workloads that may not be a good fit for site recovery for a number of different reasons, all having to do with back-end Azure infrastructure capabilities. So it's going to point out the red flags that you need to then have a conversation with the customer about, and it's going to give you the capability to plug it into our capacity planning tool. The capacity planning tool is available already today. This piece is available. What you will be able to do is capture the change rate with the tool I just put a really fuzzy screenshot up of on the last slide. It will throw this data into the capacity planner for you. Today you can download this and use it in a manual fashion. And what the capacity planning tool does today, this is a highlight of the manual workflow with capacity planning tool. This is where you know the machines and the change rate and that kind of stuff, and you just enter it in. But what our new collection tool will do is get you through to the point where you get the all-important value that I've highlighted here. What is the required bandwidth to do the initial synchronization, the first initial push of data to Azure, and then the ongoing changes, change rate based transfers that will need to be accounted for on a day-to-day basis. So the capacity planning tool is awesome today. It's great to have a conversation with a customer over. We're going to make it even better by populating this data with factual, captured, collected data from that customer's environment in the very near future. So it's going to make your ability to be a consultant, to be a trusted advisor to your customers, that much more powerful and that much easier for all parties involved going forward. So obviously I'm really excited about this because, again, nobody ever knows what their change rate is. So I'm not going to belabor this too much because we've talked about this already from a revenue opportunity perspective, but what I wanted to highlight outside of the services is the capability to reap the rewards of disaster recovery as a service from a partner of record perspective. So for those of you who have done a great job of going to your customers and saying, hey, I have additional value I can provide to you, I need to ask that you name me as the partner of record on this particular subscription or subscriptions in your environment. Not only is there the services revenue opportunity, but there's a pretty robust DPOR opportunity as well due to the back-end storage that site recovery consumes, the month-to-month licensing of site recovery on a VM by VM basis, add-on Azure services, machines that will be running full-time to support their disaster recovery environment, like Active Directory. We do recommend that they have an AD server running full-time to support the simplest recovery of AD. And if they have a SQL always-on infrastructure, they may want to use always-on technology to protect their databases. That means a running VM in the cloud. So these are all things that as part of a disaster recovery project, you're going to be able to get revenue returned to you on a monthly basis through DPOR. So yet another revenue opportunity with disaster recovery as a service. So at this point, I'm going to get into some of the components that can be deployed in Azure native environments. So a customer is running production workloads in Azure. How can you still offer disaster recovery as a service or data protection services to them when they're not running specific resources in the cloud? But before I do that, I want to see if there are any questions about what we've talked about so far about protecting on-premise machines to Azure before I push forward.
Yeah, we got a few actually, and I was about to cut you off, so it was perfect.
I figured I was due for some questions, Parker, so perfect timing.
Tracking back a little bit, you mentioned a few websites earlier. One was drj.com, and someone was asking what the other one was.
Ah, yes. So the other one is part of the TechTarget family of websites, searchdisasterrecovery.com. And that is one that I have a link to on the slide where I talk about business impact analysis. The questionnaire that I embedded in the presentation, they make freely available on the website. So a great resource, and there's a direct link to that website on the business impact analysis slide.
Awesome. Just a few more. Tracking
Sure.
back to a little bit earlier, someone asked, does the ADM perform analysis of on-prem to prepare moving to Azure?
That is exactly what ADM does. Yes, absolutely. So it is, that's one of the use cases, right? Really, ADM is something that provides value to customers on the day-to-day basis by highlighting performance between the different layers in an application, by highlighting inbound, outbound connections, making sure they're aware of everything that's out there, making sure they're aware of failed connections. So it's really something that provides value out of the box, day in and day out for customers. But because of what it does, it's a great tool for assessments and for helping that customer figure out everything they need to protect.
Awesome. And on top of that, an ADM is a part of OMS. Is that correct?
That is correct. It is a part of OMS. It is in public preview today, and hopefully we'll see that go GA soon, but an awesome, awesome solution. And I'm sure more than a few folks on the call here are aware of the fact that this is the net result of our Blue Stripe acquisition. So we have refined it. We've made it an Azure service, and it is something really, really cool to go and talk to your customers about. That booth at Ignite was hopping. I was right there in the OMS part of the expo floor, and those guys were busy. Customers wanted to talk about this.
Awesome. Just two more questions. Will Capacity Planning Tool also evaluate AWS migrations?
So it can certainly be used that way, absolutely. We're not putting anything specific into it for AWS, but the great thing is it's it captures all the metrics that we need no matter what the source environment is. It's going to capture the data change rate. It's going to capture the performance requirements for those disks, those virtual disks or physical disks. And whether that environment is found in EC2 or found in a VMware infrastructure, a Hyper-V infrastructure, a physical server environment, doesn't matter. All the statistics we need are the same, and the tool will function exactly the same.
Awesome. And the last question is, does site recovery mean just data or full device backup?
Okay, so I'm going to go back to one of my earlier slides. Take the word backup out of your vocabulary when you're talking about site recovery. Site recovery is not a backup solution. So as I mentioned earlier, we can go back 3 days in time. That is not enough to provide adequate backup for a customer, for a small company, a mid-size, an enterprise. It also does not provide a catalog that allows me to go back and search for a specific file that may have been deleted at some point in time. So site recovery is a disaster recovery solution, a replication solution. What it replicates is everything that is found on that server. So it replicates the operating system, it replicates the applications, and it replicates the application data. And when I go to perform a recovery with site recovery, what I am doing is I am specifying what machines hosting what applications need to boot in what order. So a great example is a group will be created, a consistency group. That consistency group will contain things like all the servers that make up a SharePoint environment. So I would have my backend database, I would have my remote blob storage on a file server, I would have my web front ends. What site recovery allows me to do is to specify that SQL Server starts first, then I move on to my remote blob store, then I bring up my web front ends. So I am going to recover my entire SharePoint application end to end, all of the servers, all of that application data, the applications themselves, and the machines that come up in Azure look exactly like my production machines. They have the same host name, they have all the software I added, they have any agents that I added that I run in production. They come up and they look exactly like it did on premise. That's what site recovery brings to the table. It is not something where I'm going to be restoring data to net new machines that I've built in Azure. I'm bringing up my machines from my environment exactly as they were. They just live in Azure now.
Perfect. And actually, a few more came in, but I'm just going to pick one, and then I'll let you keep going, and I'll
Okay, great.
grab you at the end. But someone just asked, is there a way to provide customers with an estimate of what compute costs they will incur once a failover occurs in ASR?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So there are a couple of ways to do that. You can sit down and do it in kind of a workshop format where you're going through the Azure pricing calculator. That's that can be a little cumbersome, but possible, right? The map tool actually has an Azure IaaS capability where I can run map. That's going to bring in their exact compute configuration as it is today on premise. So I'll know how many cores, I'll know the memory, I'll know what VMs they map to in Azure, and then that makes it a lot easier to provide a cost estimate, right? Once I know exactly what the environment looks like, I can map that to what it looks like in Azure and give them a cost component. Now, one thing to keep in mind is the customer may be okay with a degraded level of service. So it may be possible to right-size or downsize the VMs upon failover. One thing that site recovery allows you to do is override the direct configuration or the direct mapping that we do of, let's say, a 4-core 16 gigabyte of RAM machine to an equivalent in Azure. You can go in and override that and say during disaster recovery, I'm okay with 2 cores and 4 gig of RAM, 8 gig of RAM, whatever the case may be. So you can give them that direct, this is what your environment would look like if it was running on Azure during a disaster. Or you can, again, take that trusted advisor approach and say, hey, we can consider some downsizing activities as well and do it in a consultative approach. So you have that choice, you have that flexibility. We are not going to force the exact one-to-one mapping of on-premise to Azure machines from a core and a memory count perspective. Great, awesome questions, guys. I love it. I appreciate it. A lot of thought going into this. That is a beautiful thing. Okay, so far we've been talking about hybrid cloud scenarios, disaster recovery as a service to cloud. But what about those workloads that are running in Azure already? So we have and have had for quite a while the capability to back up machines running in Azure with Azure Backup Service. Really cool, gets better all the time. Those guys have done an amazing job. We're introducing things like item level restore, capability to back up machines on premium storage, and yet not store those backups on premium storage to keep it cost effective. And we support ARM and ASM infrastructures. What we are adding, and this will be going into public preview really, really soon, likely within the next 30 days, is the capability to do disaster recovery between Azure regions. So giving the customer control over failing over from one Azure region to another. And it brings in all of that cool functionality, all of the cool capabilities of disaster recovery of ASR to Azure from on-premise today, and it adds more. So if that application leverages load balancing in Azure, we will go ahead and configure the load balancing at the alternate Azure region. We will capture the network configuration, all of the rules, the NSGs, everything that makes that customer's VNets for that application, what they need to be from a security and an accessibility standpoint. We capture all of that, and we will recreate that in the new Azure region. So this is even more automated, even more sophisticated than what we can do with an on-premise to Azure environment today, because we own the Azure environment. We know how to do the discovery. We know how to pull everything together into a comprehensive recovery plan and comprehensive workflow. And we did a live demo of this at Ignite. I've got the direct link there. You skip ahead to 1 hour and 6 minutes into the presentation, and you can see this done live. And it is really cool, and it is an opportunity for you to be that trusted advisor, to be a consultant, to go in and have that conversation with your customer around why they need this, why geographically redundant storage is not the solution for them to offer regional protection of IaaS workloads, and why this is, and why this is amazing, and the fact that we are the only public cloud provider who does anything like this to offer business continuity of IaaS workloads in our cloud. Nobody else does this. This is really, really cool. Okay, I'm going to skip through the dev test because I was talking to Terry and Parker earlier. I've got another session that I'll be doing for you guys in a month or two, and we're going to talk about that scenario quite a bit. I want to move into managed services. Everything that I talked about in the services prior is something that solution integrators, non-CSPs, can certainly deliver to their customers. But for CSPs, there are some additional opportunities here. All of the tasks that we talked about before, this was highlighted on a prior slide, but you can build these in as managed service offerings, as tiered offerings. So I work with service providers today who have classes of service that they offer for managed services around Azure, managed infrastructure services. And the simplest is, I'm going to configure site recovery for you from your on-premise environment to Azure, and I'm going to monitor it to make sure everything's running properly. And we'll let you know if it's not, right? So kind of a configuration, I'm doing an integrator activity, and then I'm acting as a NOC, as an operations center. Those same service providers offer a higher tier of service that includes the configuration, the monitoring, maybe intervention to fix something that's not working properly, and then test failovers. So once a year, twice a year, 4 times a year, whatever the case may be, I'm going to go ahead and execute your disaster recovery plans for you, let you know that the applications came up, they came online, everything functioned as expected, or what didn't. What do we need to go in, take a look at, and resolve? So that's a higher level of service, right? And then all the way up to the premium offering, where what I'm doing is everything we mentioned before, and I'm also the entity that's responsible for pushing the big red button when things go wrong. So, your production site is down for some reason, or maybe an application within the production environment is down and it's going to take a while to get it back up. I'm going to go ahead and orchestrate recovery of your environment or of that application for you. I'm the button pusher. I make the magic happen. I'm going to make sure that you're back up and running. So that's an option that can be included in a gold service tier. And you can also use site recovery to spin up dev test environments for that customer. And again, I'm going to talk about that more in our next session because it's a bigger talking point. But it is possible to integrate test failovers in site recovery with Azure Dev Test Labs. So you can build exact replicas of production environments to be used for dev test activities, or app upgrades, or OS upgrades, or anything in between, because you've got an exact copy of production. And all of these, bronze, silver, gold, on a CSP agreement, what I'm going to do is add that into my cost to the customer. So for a bronze level of service, I'm going to charge one amount. For a silver level of service, another. For a gold level of service, a third. And you can think of this as a per VM charge for each one of these tiers that you will build in on top of that CSP billing that you're going to deliver back to the customer. So a great way to deliver this kind of service as a CSP, as a managed service provider. Really, really cool way to do things, and nice opportunity for you. From an architecture perspective, here's what it looks like. I've got a region. I have several customer subscriptions that I've created. Each one of them is isolated. Each one of them is an independent disaster recovery environment for that customer. And this is a great way to do multi-tenant service leveraging Azure as a massive data center, right? Now there's a little idiosyncrasy here with Hyper-V environments that are managed by VMM. That is a whole topic unto itself, but there are some good blog posts on this, and I will go ahead and add that into our thread on Yammer so we can talk about this. But there are some considerations when the customer is using SC VMM in a hosted environment, and it's a multi-tenant VMM infrastructure. So VMM managing multiple customers' environments, it can complicate things a little bit. So for the CSPs who are on this call, who would be considering this as a service offering, who would be doing this with managed hosted Hyper-V environments using VMM, we're going to want to talk a little bit further, just so you know what specific idiosyncrasies there are there. Okay, so for those of you who are CSPs, who are service providers, who have your own data centers and do hosting of applications that are not able to run in Azure, so maybe they require disks that are too big, maybe they require operating systems that aren't supported, like IBM AIX or ZOS or iSeries, maybe HP UX. Whatever the case may be, this offers a great opportunity to provide yet another service where the open systems workloads, the Windows and the Linux workloads that can run in Azure are protected there, and then those proprietary Unix or mainframe environments are protected in a data center that you have or with a hoster that you work with, and then you can use ExpressRoute as a way to bridge between Azure and that other environment, and make it a seamless kind of spanned data center from the customer's perspective. Because some of those things we can't add an IBM P series, we can't add AIX systems into an Azure data center, right? We just don't do that. So that's a great way to be creative, bring value to that customer, and help deliver a comprehensive disaster recovery solution. So at this point, that's all the slides I had for you. What I wanted to do was shift over to a demo and show you some of the recent improvements and advancements that we've done here with Site Recovery. We've done some really neat things. And great for you to show to your customers, to kind of make the pitch on why this is a great solution, why disaster recovery to cloud is a great way to go. Because boy, this demos well makes for a great demo. So let me switch over to my desktop. While I'm doing that, Parker, if you wanted to throw a question or two at me while I'm switching over here, that would be cool.
Yeah, we got two, maybe three actually, but just as for now, can you discuss ASR for migrating machines from on-premise to Azure? One issue that we run into is the client doesn't have a server available to install any ASR components on-premise.
Yeah, that's a tough one because I don't know how we can help them. I mean, to be quite honest with you, I know that sounds kind of glib, but if they don't have the ability to spin up a VM in order to accommodate our resources, the management server that we need to do the migration, I'm concerned that they're not going to have the storage that they would need. I'd be concerned they're not going to have the network connectivity that they need. Because really what we're talking about here is a VM. We need one VM to set up and configure to drive the migration. So I would say for those customers, they're likely to have multiple problems where this is probably not something that's gonna work for them. I mean I don't know that they could migrate to cloud, period, right? Now that being said, if that really is their only limit, if they really don't have the capability to spin up one VM, there are other solutions that they could look at, that they could use, that wouldn't require another machine being deployed, like Double Take. That's an agent-based solution. They could use that, but now they're looking at paying money for that software, whereas site recovery is free for migrations. So, again, I'm not trying to to dismiss that or minimize it, but I would really worry that they've got bigger problems that will not let them migrate to Azure.
I'll let you get to this demo, and we'll finish up any questions if we have time at the end.
Awesome. And this will be a really quick one. I'm going to go through, highlight a few important things. I'm going to start with migration. So with site recovery, we need a recovery services vault created. Really easy. I go in here, I type in recovery services, and I've got a net new recovery services vault that's created in about 60 seconds. The other thing that site recovery needs set up before you can configure it for migration or replication is a storage account. You can use multiple. They can be premium. They can be standard. We do not yet support cool storage today, but that's likely a good thing because when you think about it, if you are doing recovery, if you're going to be running these machines in Azure, you need a level of performance that cool storage is probably not going to be able to provide. So I would argue that cool storage should never be an option for site recovery, but that being said, we may still introduce it anyway as an option. But once I have that, I have a storage account created, I have my recovery services vault created, then I need to go and deploy my on-premise component. We have really, really awesome, easy, wizard-based workflows to follow through. It includes the download link to the on-premise component, step-by-step instructions for getting it up and running. Once I have that in place, then I can start replicating machines. And here's how it looks. I'm going to go in. I am going to choose what machine I want to replicate from what environment. So we have the capability to replicate, again, source VMs from VMware and Hyper-V, physical servers. We do the discovery of the environment, so we're going to be able to point out everything that's there that's eligible for replication. I need to choose where I want these machines to go, either to be migrated to or where they would boot in the event of a failover. So that includes a storage account, and again, you can leverage multiple from the same recovery services vault. And before I hit that failover or that migrate, I have to have a VNet configured for the VM. So we give you the capability while you're setting this up, while you're starting the data transfer, to go ahead and point to the VNet. And you don't have to do this. I can come back and do this later, right? Which is why I said you have to have a storage account. This is mandatory, but the networking you can figure out after the fact. So where is it going? And then what do I want to replicate or migrate? And in my case, these are virtual machines running in a VMware infrastructure. You can see I've got a whole bunch of machines. We've got more than 3 pages of machines here. So if I want to narrow it down and just look at the machines that are running CentOS, I'm migrating an application based on Linux. I can quickly filter and search and find those machines, and then select one or multiple machines, and then go ahead and configure parameters like what storage account on an individual machine-by-machine basis will they be replicated to, and if they have more than one disk, maybe there's a disk I want to skip replicating. Maybe it's local SQL Server backups. I don't need to send all that data to Azure. Maybe it's a disk used for TempDB. No reason to send TempDB. That's going to be cleared out and recreated. Why the heck should I replicate all that transient data? So you choose what machines, what disks on those machines, and then go. We will push the splitter driver, the software that's required, out to those source machines from that on-premise VM, that management server, and start transferring the data to Azure. It can be throttled so we don't overrun the customer's network. And then once I have that completed, once I get that machine into a state where it's replicated and it's protected, now I can go ahead and either perform a test failover or migrate or failover those machines one at a time, or in an orchestrated fashion here. So I've got some machines. Looks like we're having a problem with replication. I think we've had some network issues in our environment. But here I can choose to do a test failover, which basically creates a copy of that machine, keeps replication running in the background, or do a failover that will boot this as though I now needed to run production on it. And then once I've done this failover, so I have this machine running in Azure, I will have the option that we added recently to complete migration. And what does complete migration do? Well, it is going to remove the machine from my list of replicated items. It's going to sever the relationship between the on-premise environment and Azure for that particular machine. So what it does is it gives me cleanup, simple cleanup, and now what I've done is I have determined and I have committed that machine to running in Azure full-time for production. So we added in that new complete migration capability, makes it easier to go ahead, use site recovery for migration, and also make sure that the customer will not be charged for something that they're no longer using. If they did intend to use it for migration, but they forgot to clean up, we're going to charge them every month for the site recovery fee after 31 days. They get 31 days free for migration. Now, that's great on a machine-to-machine basis, but what if I want to accommodate more than one machine at a time? I want to migrate a bunch of machines at once. I want to orchestrate disaster recovery of a bunch of machines at once. That's where a recovery plan comes into play. This is the automation component. So what recovery plans allow me to do is specify the start order for the machines. It starts top down, and then also inject things like Azure Automation Runbooks. So what I can do is make sure, that I can do more sophisticated recovery capabilities, like adding in the addition of a public IP address for a particular machine. Boot it, assign a public IP address, register it with Azure DNS or with Traffic Manager or whatever the case may be, and I have further automated the recovery of a very sophisticated application. So really, really cool, super simple to add in automation runbooks as part of a recovery plan, and this is just an awesome capability of site recovery. Here's that start order. Start SQL Server first, start these 3 machines after SQL Server has successfully booted, and then go ahead and run my really, really cool scripts that are stored in my Azure Automation account. So that's the quick thing, the important things I wanted to show everybody from a demo perspective. I can do the failover, I can do the migration of, in this case, these 4 machines at one time. I can do a test failover anytime I want, as many times as I want, non-disruptively. I can take the clones from this test failover, move them into Azure Dev Test Labs, and now I've got a dev test environment that is built based on my production environment. This is a really, really powerful tool set and service, and offers tons of opportunities for all of you to deepen your relationship with your customer and to yield some pretty significant and meaningful revenue. So Parker, how are we looking on the questions? Anything I can answer here in the last couple of minutes?
We've got a few coming in, so I'll just rattle them off and we'll see what we have time for. First one is, if you have a disaster in Site A and restore everything in Azure, can you set up a site-to-site VPN from a different site to access the servers in Azure? And if the answer is yes, does this need to be set up before you do the restore?
Oh, great question. So, yeah, that's absolutely one way you can do it. You can allow access from a site or multiple sites into this infrastructure is through site-to-site VPNs. I would recommend that you look through the networking documentation, make sure you're aware of the limits in terms of number of sites that can connect and how many can we handle in a VPN gateway. You can absolutely configure things like that after the fact. So, one thing that's really nice about Site Recovery and its integration with Azure Automation is I could build that into my runbook. I could build out the construction of the site-to-site VPN tunnel as a step in my recovery plan, calling that with an automation runbook. So that means 2 things. 1, I can make it easy to do when things go horribly wrong. 2, I'm not paying for it until I need it, because there is a charge for site-to-site VPN, right? So great question. I love it. You're thinking along the right lines. And the simple answer to your question is yes, you can absolutely do it after the fact, and we can even automate it.
Perfect. I'll keep these coming in just so everyone else hears this. Any questions we don't get to, I'll make sure to send over to Karl, and we'll take these offline in the Amber group as well. So if we don't answer your question, we're not ignoring you. I promise we will get to them. But just another one, are there any documented lab guides that will allow us to build out a demo environment to showcase to customers?
So specific lab guides, no. I would recommend looking at the public documentation for site recovery, particularly under the deploy section. What we do a good job of doing is that's going to show you everything you need in order to build your demo environment. And then in terms of executing demos, it also walks you through the things you would show during a demo. That documentation shows how to do a test failover. You're going to do that in every demo you do. I can pretty much guarantee it. It's going to walk you through failover and failback, the types of things that you would need to do. So while there is no specific demo guide, the public documentation is really all you would need.
Next is, on the customer that can't provide on-prem VM for ASR, is it possible to spin management server for ASR on Azure VMs?
No, that would be a horrible idea. Quite honestly, the management server needs to be close to the machines to be replicated, and reason being, it's capturing all of those changes. It is compressing them, and it is encrypting them for transfer to Azure. So we want to make sure that traffic is encrypted. That's in the customer's best interest. And the compression that it does prior to transfer is going to be in their best interest from a network bandwidth perspective. So I would say, where that's really a problem, and again, I want to emphasize that they do have enough storage capacity and they do have enough network capacity to actually accommodate site recovery for migration or DR, it's an opportunity for you to maybe provide a machine as a service, bring in a machine that could be used for that management server purpose, sell them a net new machine that they could use for the management server, something to accommodate that need. It is critical. I can't emphasize enough how critical it is that machine is on premise and they have the ability in one way, shape, or form to allocate it.
Someone asked about failback as well.
Anything specific about failback?
It just said, what about failback, question mark. So if that person can potentially clarify, that would be phenomenal.
Yeah, I'll start with failback is possible. I'll start there. That's something that I can absolutely do. After I execute a failover, I will then see a new option show up in the interface to perform a failback. So we do that, absolutely. That customer is not stuck in Azure, where they want this for DR and not for migration. They can go back. We document what's needed, what's required, depending on their connectivity. They're likely going to need a machine running in Azure to accommodate the changes that are occurring, have occurred, and we have all of that fully documented in terms of Azure VM size, how to deploy the whole bit. But yes, you can fail back, and we have it very comprehensively documented. I'm going to bring those documents up while we're talking.
And we can just keep this going, and then worst case, people can always go back and check the recording too. But another question that came across is that they understand that the storage account is used to hold the data that is replicated to Azure, but what does the recovery service vault do?
That's an awesome question. Thank you for asking that. So you're right. Storage account holds the data that is being transferred, right? It basically holds the disks for those replicated machines. What the recovery services vault does is it hosts the metadata for the service. So what is being protected, the recovery plans, it provides the monitoring interface. So has something gone wrong with protection? Is there trouble? Do we need to trigger an alert and let you or let the customer know, or both? That's its job. You can think of it as the management and configuration entity for site recovery. Great question.
Someone asked as well, does ASR for VMware customers allow for an easy way to pull the workloads back on-prem after a failover should they need to?
Yeah, so that is the failback question.
Okay.
And yes, it absolutely does. Or I should say that's the same thing as failback, right? When we talk about failback, it's I've been running in Azure, now I want to go back, I want to go back to VMware. Yes, absolutely, it does. If it didn't do that, we couldn't call it disaster recovery. We would have to call it migrate, and that's it, right? That would be really what it was. That is documented here. Failback VMware VMs and physical servers. So we've got that whole workflow documented here. Infrastructure requirements, steps to do it. All of that is highlighted there in gory detail. And then from the individual who asked the demo kind of workflow question before, demo document, these deployment documents are killer. They go into exactly what when I highlighted earlier, the common demo scenarios. How am I going to set up replication for a net new server? Customers always want to see that. How do I do a test failover? That's in here. Everything you would do during a demo is clearly and explicitly outlined here in the deployment documentation. Oops, I'll get that banner out of the way. There we go.
We got two more questions, and then we'll close it out. And anything else that comes in, we'll just take it offline. First one is just a reiteration of one of the earlier questions, but someone asked, so the storage account and vault in the ARM is the same for both backup and ASR. Is that correct, that you don't need two vaults anymore?
That is correct. Great question. So let me highlight that here real quick. I love it. Awesome question. Yes. So what we did, and I forget how long ago this was. I want to say this was maybe back in February. We merged the administrative functionality for administrative and monitoring for site recovery and backup. So when I go into one of these recovery services vaults, you'll see that the immediate dashboard shows me all of my backup information, all of my site recovery information, and then I have the management touch points for both of them, here in the same common interface as well. So yes, you got it absolutely correct, and we did merge that functionality for the two, or I guess I should say the administrative functionality for the two.
And the last question is, can we see a demo of what the DR to other Azure regions, or is that not available yet?
So if you go back to the presentation, I included a link to a recorded demo of it that we did live at Ignite. That is the only thing that I have for you today. We are going to be going into public preview, targeting by the end of the calendar year, so by the end of December. And at that point, we'll do all sorts of live demos. I'll have it lit up here in my subscription. I'll be able to do it. You'll have access to it. But for now, that Ignite session that I highlighted, that URL that I embedded in the slides, that is the best place to go and see it in action.
Perfect. And just so everyone knows, the slides are posted in our Yammer group, and if you do not have a link or anything to the Yammer group, I actually did post that in the message board as well. And so with that, although there's another question coming in, Karl, I'll let you take that one offline, but just want to thank everyone for joining us this Thursday. Karl, thank you for the demo presentation. And everything that you provide with us in these monthly community calls. And everyone, if you wouldn't mind sticking around just for a minute or two, some questions will pop up in your message pane. If you would answer those, we would all greatly appreciate it. But with that, I'm going to end the stream. Thank you guys so much, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Parker.